you're putting together the history of the community, no matter how broadly you define community, you're looking at the history of the pillars of the community, not just people, but organizations that have have had great vision and then great execution and grown and changed over time.
I think it's important to honor the history because of the commitment, the passion, the vision of people who envisioned ArtsWest in the first place and had started programs before it which were the foundation of ArtsWest.
And so to be able to detail how that happened and why that happened is vital.
There always has to be people with a vision and the willingness to work for the vision. And certainly the people who started this were those kinds of people, because it takes a lot of work and a lot of convincing people to support it.
The volunteer aspect seemed to be a group of friends, old friends of Karen and Jim Kinch. All of them seemed to be West Seattle residents that lived very nearby.
So it was around 79, 1980. I read this little thing in the West Side paper about a meeting at a restaurant up here for folks wanting to start totem theater. And of course that involved Karen and a few other significant people.
Some of the things that they wanted to do at this meeting was decide on a potential place they knew about to do a play, what to charge for tickets, what to even call the organization. And because Karen was so insistent that this was going to be in West Seattle, she wanted that as part of the name.
They just all took on different roles. Somebody did the tickets, somebody did the programs, somebody else was good at doing something else, and it all came together.
I think it was 1982, and actually produced the first show, and it was called God's Favorite, and Karen Kinch directed it, and Gwen Purdy was in it, and Norm Rambo. We had it in the Congregational Church on Hill Street.
Norm was the director at the Congregational Church where they were, and someone approached him about working with the theater, and I don't know who that was, but that's how he got involved with getting the first production there. Norm was very reliable, and if he said he was going to do something, he did it to the best of his ability.
He knew that they did classical concerts in the basement of their facility, so he felt that they might be open to the idea of a theater performing there, and it turned out that it was. It meant that we had to live within what their needs were at the church, of course, so couldn't nail sets into the floor or anything like that. We had to move everything Saturday night because they used it on Sundays. Bare bones scenery, no lighting system, of course. But hey, we could do it.
So one of the challenges was bringing in all of the lighting fixtures, and that was kind of a thing that I helped with because they knew that I'd done some lighting at other theaters, setting up all the chairs, setting up every piece of furniture, the entire set.
I think it was almost fun being in the basement of the church, because we recreated apartments and houses in the basement of a church from this blank wall, scrounging around trying to find lights for a show and that don't blow up on you, and going to yard sales to find pieces of furniture, and it was fun.
Sue Mitchell, another member from the beginning, produced Artichoke, and then the third show that we did in the church was a comedy set in a Manhattan apartment. It was called Mary Mary.
I staged management and ran the lights, which was fun. Like, we borrowed lights from, I can't remember his name. It was very hard. And sometimes we had to use a ruler to turn the lights on and off because you didn't have a master switch. And I went and bought I went to PNTA and bought gels. And then they brought in this orange sofa. So I had to go back to PNTA, and they were great help because I didn't really know anything about lighting. I knew how they were supposed to work, and everything worked usually. But anyway, those were fun times because we were young and all working together, and that's what's fun about community theater.
I know early on the way that they used to sell tickets was they would go to the Safeway. I don't know if the new one was built at the time or just this one, and they literally would stand outside with a booth and try to hook people in to buy season tickets or at least come see the show. So community effort, it absolutely was. It was a grassroots effort, and Safeway gave them permission, and it was Norm, Edie, and Karen, and they would stand outside and just hook people in and say, hey, we got a theater going. Would you like to come see some shows? Because there was nothing else in West Seattle at that time.
During the run of Artichoke, a woman came up to me after the performance and introduced herself as Bonnie Casey, who was the drama instructor at South Seattle Community College. And she wanted our group to know that we should go up and talk to the president of the college, Jerry Brocky, because we could probably work something out that would be very advantageous to the theater. So we did. When they opened the door, one of the doors to this theater, it was a theater. There were upholstered seats in rows. There was a complete lighting grid full of lighting instruments in the ceiling. We found out it had originally been intended as a science lecture hall, but they had built a wooden stage as platforming above that, so we could nail sets into the floor. We could even build the sets on site.
Because we were in this little classroom/theater, we never knew from day to day whether or not South Seattle community was going to use the theater for some sort of presentation or conference. And oftentimes, I would get there in the late afternoon with the other volunteers, and our set had been totally dismantled. So we would have to put it all back. That happened many times, and it was very upsetting the first couple times, but we made it.
We had a tech space with sound and lighting, and then we had our stage manager who would call the cues. And from there, I did all sorts of things. I eventually became the production manager.
We did have very few members that were actors, but we brought in and had auditions for our plays. And they were brought not just from West Seattle, they were from all over the city or in the area. And we took good care of our actors. This gave us a lot of creds in the acting community, which attracted better actors. And you get better actors, you can put on different plays. Most of what we did in Totem were old standards.
I went up to the Totem Theater, which was up at the community college, and that's where we used to have our shows and do our rehearsals. And the stage was maybe 12 feet, 14 feet wide. That was it, no depth, but we made theater, and that's what it's about. Yeah, early on, that was fun, really fun.
One of my favorite shows and one of my favorite experiences was I Never Sang for My Father. I was cast in the show, and it wasn't a big role. I was cast as a waitress, and I had to do a little Irish brogue, and it was very fun, and just being a part of the cast was really exciting.
I got to play Dr. Mayberry, and it was, fortunately, it was a small part. I think I was only on stage 2 different times. And I didn't feel that terrific about my performance after finally getting on stage, but whatever. It was still, it was a great experience. We all just kind of came together and everybody did what they needed to do.
They did a lot of plays there, and they were always well attended and enjoyed. They were good quality. And we tried to make sure that the actors had, and the crew, had food to eat, because often they came straight from work for the performances.
I wanted to learn how to build sets, and in order to do that, I had to join Totem. And so they put me on the board of directors. And I had very little time for helping build sets. When we had to leave, we were looking for a place to put on our plays. And we did an awful lot of searching, and we had to do it in West Seattle.
I want to say it was in 1988, possibly even 87, that Totem Theater went on hiatus, and the West Seattle Cultural Society formed.
It was a really big leap for an organization to bring two really disparate groups together. I think that there are always going to be a lot of competing priorities in any organizations composed of people who are there because they have their own particular interests. I think that prior to, so far as I know, prior to the Cultural Society and the theater coming together, there had been just classical music and the visual arts. Boyd Swanson gathered some people together that he had met through the West Seattle Chamber of Commerce and said, what would you think if we started an arts organization that sponsored and produced things other than theater, since we have West Seattle Totem Theater for our community? And they agreed. So he went about looking for board members for that kind of organization. And the name that they had come up with, just sketching around a table at Angelina's restaurant, was the West Seattle Cultural Society.
It was in the late 80s. We moved to West Seattle, and one day when we were up near the grocery store, we walked into this little tiny storefront, and Edie Neeson was sitting there, and we asked her what it was all about, and she explained that there was an interest in creating a cultural center in West Seattle, and we've always been interested in art, so we kind of got sucked in.
Well, we started out at Jefferson Square with the just strictly art, and trying to get memberships and get people more involved within the community. We had musical programs, and they were at a church, a local church, and we had Totem Theater, and that was out at the college, the community college.
Dr. Jane Hardy, who is a pianist on the faculty at Pacific Lutheran University, knew of several other composers or musicians that lived in West Seattle, and she said, why don't you, as your organization, start with sponsoring some chamber music concerts? And we agreed. So the first year it was just a single concert, and that was successful, and it launched what became an actual series of either 3 or 4 concerts every year.
We had no space for a music concert, and they used the church sanctuaries. I can remember going to a couple of the churches for the programs, and the space was, the sound was better.
The music program lasted for several years. The problem with the music program was it took as much advertising and much energy to advertise and promote a single performance as it did a play.
Someone donated some space at Jefferson Square, and we were just a small, operating on a very small budget.
There was room for art, and I pulled my husband in to help hang paintings and patch up the walls and so on. but it had no room for a music program and no room for the theater program.
So my husband Larry and I, among other people, started painting and ripping out some stuff and fixed that up and turned it into a gallery.
We'd have art shows, have some artists submit their, resume, and we hung pictures in the space up there.
And so we set up the gallery, and I knew some people that lived in West Seattle that were also interested, and they joined in, and so we put a committee together for the visual arts.
One day on the tennis court, I was introduced to a woman named Gloria Runnings, and I knew that Gloria had had galleries. So she came, she got involved, she worked with me on the studio tour. She was great at interviewing artists and picking out things that would be interesting to the public.
She was the volunteer gallery manager for a long time, and she really brought the gallery up to a professional level. That was very important to her with the shows and everything.
And then they moved down to the lower level, and then during that time I was involved in the visual arts gallery, working with the gallery. I also volunteered in the gallery, helping meeting and greeting people and things like that. I also got involved in doing a holiday arts fair that they did during December, where we got together a lot of local artists and had them selling their arts. We had music, we had people doing crafts, we had painters, sculptors, wide spectrum of things. That was kind of the idea, to try and show what was going on in West Seattle in the art scene and kind of make some additional funds for the organization at the same time.
I got involved mainly as a volunteer for doing posters and promotional pieces, and then started showing my own work. You see the excitement, you see the build, you see a new community asset, and people encourage your participation, and I'm all about helping build and sustain these assets as opposed to standing on the sidelines and complaining about where's this place that I can show my work. Will help build it, help maintain it, help sustain it.
Changing from the West Seattle Cultural Society to ArtsWest seemed to be a good move because it combined a theater and a gallery, and that's kind of what we all were aiming for. The West Seattle Cultural Society kind of was misleading to a lot of people, and it seemed like ArtsWest would draw them in.
I got introduced to ArtsWest when it was the West Seattle Cultural Arts Society, when they were in the process of trying to merge the two organizations and build a new facility as a combined entity of display art and performing art.
And that's about the time when we started looking at acquiring another space, a bigger space, a permanent space that had a theater, seat, and that sort of thing. And the Kinches were involved, and they were involved in the theater part of it, Totem Theater, and they had very big plans, very big ideas, and they wanted to build a 350-seat theater complex with classrooms and all kinds of things that looked like a really, really enormous project. So the board decided that we needed to get some consultants.
All this was going on at the same time while we were over at Jefferson Square, and lots of people meeting to try to put all this together, because it was a pretty big project. First of all, they had to decide if we were going to do it, and then to pull together a board and all the kinds of things you have to have for a nonprofit. And then out of there, too, was a lot of the money raising that was going on, and the search committee as to where could we find in West Seattle a place for a theater.
We asked Martha Kongsgaard if she would meet with us, and so she came, and it was a very clear memory I have of inviting her and Edie wanting me to be there at the meeting, and just what a wonderful, sort of watershed experience that was to have her come in and say, well, what do you need?
A guy, West Seattle, by the name of John Franco, came to my house. I've known his family forever. He had Franco's Hidden Harbor. And he wanted to talk to me. And he was like about 80-year-old guy. And he said, I want to talk to you. He came into my den. And he sat down. I said, what is it, John, that you want? He said, Michael, you need to get off your you-know-what, and I want you to help us build a theater in West Seattle, or ArtsWest.
When Michael asked me to co-chair this effort with him, it was clear we needed to raise some multiple of millions of dollars, and honestly, I can't remember now. At the time, it seemed enormous because it was my first or second foray into the community in that world. I also, frankly, didn't know that many people in West Seattle, and it seemed a long way from downtown Seattle. So the thought that anybody from Bellevue or Medina or Washington Park would be interested in a tiny theater in West Seattle seemed sort of implausible. So we really had to mine this community and convince our neighbors. And we went door to door, and if you think I'm kidding, I'm not kidding.
And one of the things I recall the most was going to Bob Easting's house, a guy who I had never met.
One day I knock on the front door and there was Michael Al-Hadif and somebody with him, maybe Larry Sukut or whoever it would have been, seeking funds, donations for the capital campaign.
And I remember walking into his living room and saying, we're trying to build this building, and I'm trying to raise some money, and I went through the thing and a little bit of my history, and I can just see him in his plaid shirt, his rolled up sleeves, and said, so are you going to be in charge of this? And I said, yeah.
So I ended up donating some money into the capital campaign at the start, and we eventually got the funds we needed to get started with the project.
You know, when we did the sort of door-to-door house party routine to try to drum up support, I just remember, Michael, who's so self-effacing and quiet and an absolute powerhouse. We sort of were Mutt and Jeff. We would go and I'd be the really loud one and the theatrical one, and I had my script, Michael had his script, whoever was the ED at the time would have their script, and we just sort of took this dog and pony show up and down the beach. It was great fun. It was just authentic, no nonsense, pure joy, scrappy community building, but really was a privilege to be a part of.
Fundraising efforts, we're at my house, Martha Consgard, Bob Yeasting, Gloria Running, Shannon Flora. I could name a lot of people, but I mean that's off the top of my head. It was a great community effort, and one of the things that was surprising when the Gates Foundation, who normally doesn't support these things, they gave us some money. They felt it was very important, and that our message was very good. Those are just, certain things that stand out.
My wonderful neighbor Martha Consgard said, there is something happening up at the junction. And I said, what? It's dead up there. Nothing's open. She said, no, something is a birthing. You need to come up and see it. And I said, but I'm heading out on a bike ride. Come on up.
And this lady comes in with a bicycle and a helmet, her little mirror in the back, or little stuff like that. And she parks it right inside the building. She gets off the bike.
She said, I'm Judy Piggott. And I said, thanks so much for coming. What can we tell you more? We'd sent her things in the mail. And she was fully aware of what was going on. She asked us a couple of pointed questions, and then out of her back pocket took a checkbook and wrote us the largest gift I think we probably received. Right then and there, on the spot, 6 figures, clipped her clipped her pants again and walked out the door.
And I was blown away with the vision that was expressed by the people who were here, and said, yes, I absolutely want to be part of this. And then I went on my bike ride on my merry way.
And I remember standing there thinking, this thing's going to fly. This thing's going to fly. And if she's representative of the people of this part of Seattle, we may not need those people on the other side of the bridge, because this was a homegrown deal.
I think the surprise of the campaign was that among all our sort of myriad needs in West Seattle, that people rose in support of arts. And I think that speaks a lot to this community, speaks a lot to the leadership of that campaign, and the understanding that how important a role that the arts plays in our sort of civic life.
It was one of the first, at least in my memory, coalescing around a big idea in West Seattle that was both took the form of having to raise money, but also in a way to organize the community. So we had to raise money, and we didn't have a building. We had to find the architect, we had to find, the staff, and we were working out of what was, I think, before maybe a pizzeria in Jefferson Square.
And at that time, county council members had discretionary funds that they could direct toward projects that they felt needed attention in their communities.
And so we went down and presented to them our plan and the drawings that we'd made of the building and on and on and on. And they came back with a small grant. Particularly, again, that was after Michael O'Haddoff had made his match pledge, and that was enough to get their attention.
Greg Nichols, who at that time was a county council person, he made ArtsWest a councilmanic appropriation of $25,000. Well, that was enough money to hire a fundraising consultant. And Margaret helped us negotiate with the Collins Group, which was the consultant we chose, to do this feasibility study in stages.
We had a real estate person who went around and kind of looked out properties and sent us around to various places to look at.
We tried to get some property down the waterfront, around, just beyond Salty's in that area. I approached port commissioners trying to line that stuff up, along with other people, not just me. And things didn't pan out. We went to the Kinney School was a place we were looking at, and that didn't work.
We didn't limit ourselves to California Avenue. We looked at Del Ridge. I think we looked a little bit further south. Obviously, we looked north because we'd already tried our hand at the Hill Street Theater, or the Hill Street Church.
And finally, they sent us to this property down on California. And it had lots and lots of advantages in terms of where it was located. It was central. And
West Seattle was a wonderful little, more insulated community that felt it was more of an island than a peninsula. And J.C. Penney's was sort of the high end of what was around here. However, nobody was out after 7 p.m. So when Meredith's Five and Dime was being sold, and the brilliance of the people who were excited at that point, they saw the potential here to turn a Five and Dime into something that could be a cultural center.
it had been a Five and Dime store for years and years and years, and then it was a kind of a dollar store kind of thing. And there was junk everywhere, and then it had been partly subdivided. One southeast corner had a motorcycle shop.
And it had been struggling for a while. And like I said, the owner of the property was very happy to have us in here.
I think we were surprised that we did it in fairly short order in the big scheme of things. So there was obviously, I think, a yearning and a need to have something happening in this community because it was sort of viewed in some ways as sort of off the beaten track and all that, but it's still it's a very significant part of the population of the city of Seattle, but people sort of view West Seattle as, back in those days anyways, kind of over there.
We were definitely a backwater, and we didn't want to have it turned upside down. But there obviously was room to grow in West Seattle. And Richard Florida was talking about how arts could change communities. We'd seen it done in Tacoma. So we, this little ragtag group of people, thought we were going to just put our vision in place and build a theater and see what happened. And I think our vision was that the arts could change the world.
So you need to have stuff here. You need to have the arts here. It's a large community. It's a diverse community. And, you know, there's many, many kids and even adults in this community that might be their first experience with the arts.
I think we met every week, actually, for a year and a half or 2 years. Staff would come and go, but it was sort of the people around the table who had to look each other in the eye and say, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. If I say I'm going to do this, I'm going to get it done.
We had a member who was a good architect, Terry Williams, and another person, and they drew up some plans, and with a lot of sweat equity, we tore the place down and built it back up.
Never done a theater before. That didn't stop me from thinking that I couldn't do one. But that's probably why I was really nervous at the donors party too, was how was it going to come out. But there was a lot of lighting and electronics that I was a little worried about. Acoustics and those types of things, architects sort of learn how to do that.
It's just a big shell with high ceilings, which worked okay for this part, the theater part. We raised like $2.8 million or something like that, which was a struggle in itself. But to build this, get in the seats, all the lights, all the equipment that we needed, totally remodeling the inside of the building. And it's worked out.
So we started with the thrust stage and then pulling the seats all the way around. We could get the seats in and still have room at the front and the back for art gallery with a hallway. And it gave us a place to put like restrooms and things like that. And then the stairway in the front so that we could put the dressing rooms and the offices. And then they decided that they wanted to have a costume shop. So we were wondering where to put that. So that's when we built the mezzanine.
We're just so lucky to have this theater in our community, and the fact that the architects could design something that's really very functional, and then that the community could raise the money to do it, because this was a falling down building.
Design is design, but seating and you know, how to display art and how to move people through a building. It's got to be sort of the same for any type of building that you do. It was scary, but it was exhilarating at the same time.
Larry had to go first because he had done so much work up to that point. He was the board president through almost all capital campaign. So I think it was him. I mean, I remember I was there. I don't remember if I actually did it, but I mean, he sort of did the initial thing, but we did have a construction crew then that did the actual demolition. But it totally, it was no question who was going to get the first whack at it, and it was going to be Larry.
We came in with hammers and buckets and cleaned out the basement and basically everything out of the building, took it down to the rafters. We had scaffolding that was high enough that you could get up into the rafters and pull all the stuff down from the rafters and Oh, it was great fun. I love tearing stuff up. The other thought was that we wanted to be able to see what was there to make sure the structure was good. And again, a lot of it was cleaning rubble out of the basement. And I got a whole bunch of 5-gallon buckets. And so they would scoop up this lath, the plaster from the lath, and in these buckets. And there was an elevator in that corner of the building for bringing boxes down. Well, it would also take, but that only lasted about, I don't know, 2 weekends, and then it broke down. So then from that point on, we were carrying these, 2 5-gallon buckets up the steps and then dumping it in the dumpster.
I do remember wearing a hard hat, hitting dirt in the 5 and dime when we had demolished it enough, with Dow Constantine maybe, and maybe Greg Nichols. And that was a big deal. And you could see the beautiful beams. You could, I think, see even then that there was water. The water table was pretty high, which was sort of frightening.
And many of us got involved in just the plain old dust and dirt and hitting the walls down and just getting grimy and gritty because we really wanted this to happen. And so much of it had to be done by volunteers.
I was one of the early people in there helping to gut this space so that the architects could come in and put in a theater. And that's what my golden hammer is for, with a wonderful little thank you card with the drawing of the ArtsWest Street in California. And I was in there climbing scaffolding up to this old ceiling and knocking out all this old ceiling stuff that came crashing down. And anyway, spent a lot of time there helping to empty that space.
Well, I helped when they were tearing down the walls of this building, and also started out by putting all the information for the programs together in the beginning before they did, had the slick programs they have now. We just kind of put stuff together. I did all of that.
When I came in one time for one of the early fundraisers or planning stages, I looked around and there was just a shell here, and I thought, really? You guys are going to build a theater here? And I had my doubts, but I didn't have the vision. And sure enough, within a couple of years, it was done.
Something very good came out of it in terms of ArtsWest, which has been an amazing theater to watch it evolve from the dust and the dirt, and they'll sweat and labor into a really professional theater.
When we knew that the building was going to go forward, and a lot of the demolition had been done inside the building. It was still habitable, but they hadn't started. They actually did one of the plays in the gutted out building, which was really cool.
We set up a bunch of chairs in the middle and did a 2-man play called The Lonely Planet.
It was about a map store, a globe store. It was really, it really lended itself to that because it was supposed to be kind of an old, dark shop. So the actors would take their entrances from California Avenue and stuff, and that was just really neat. That was a really good thing to do before it opened up to being a regular, beautiful theater.
It was our very first production, and it went very well, and we got a little bit of publicity out of that, and that was kind of the beginning of the whole thing.
I organized, I think it was the opening day events when the theater finally opened. I organized a thing where we had acts from the community and all over. It was like an all-day sort of celebration event.
When we first opened, we had music, we had the theater, we had the art gallery, some dance. There were all these different things to give us more credence, and which also helped us with raising the funds.
Before the theater show, like opening night, they would set up for dinner and theater downstairs. They'd change it into like 8 tables of the big round tables, and then have a meal catered. And that's when we had one of our floods. So we packed everything up and sent it out the back door to somebody and moved the event to someone else's house, because we had to actually close the theater because there was so much water in the basement that we couldn't put on a show that night.
There was water 2-3 inches deep in the basement where, you know, everything happened, the green room and the players all got ready and dressing room and all of that. And the place was literally flooding. You know, call at midnight and go down there and see if we could fix the problem. And I came up with a solution to a pumping thing that was temporary, but it worked for a few years until they got a little better fix.
We used to have opening night dinners where we would have dinner downstairs and the performances upstairs. So I got involved with just using my production background, getting involved in making sure we had caterers and the rooms were decorated, and it was a wonderful experience for everybody to kind of have this unique night out that they had not been able to have before in West Seattle.
Everybody chipped in to do things like decorate the lobby, set up the food for an event, put labels on mailers. That was not above or below anybody. Paid, volunteer, didn't matter. Everybody had the spirit of having to jump in and do that because that's what needed to be done to make this thing work, and we were all really committed to making this thing work.
Our first big play we did when we opened was Once Upon a Mattress, which is a very frothy, light musical. It's not my favorite one. And we were doing some shows like Anne of Green Gables, but then every once in a while they would do something like Medea the Musical, which is this very campy, you know, risque type of thing. So there was some interesting things mixed in there. I mean, on the one hand, you want to have a clear kind of vision. And when you have a clear vision, it may not appeal to everybody in the community.
I first got involved with ArtsWest in early 2000. No, it was late 2000, I remember, because it was just toward the end of their first main stage season in the new space, just coming to the end of the capital campaign, and that interesting transition from a capital campaign to an operating campaign, theater. Remember, it was not just a theater, it was also a concert venue for music, it was an art gallery, and it was a place where education had an important role to play. So my first task was to make sure that the theater was operating sustainably.
I had not been in a play since high school, and Chris Zinovich was the artistic director then, and he had very high degree of artistic integrity, but I think he also sometimes knew what would sell tickets, so I would call it a bit of stunt casting. But it was a musical called Baby, so I played 7 different, it was a small ensemble, there were 6 leads, and then there was 4 of us that played every other part in the play. I do think it's one of the worst posters we ever had for a play, and they shouldn't put that because the person who did it might did it, but you know, we have all these beautiful artistic posters, and that one was just, it's like this green floating baby in space thing. It was very strange.
I was first on stage, not as a director, but as an actor when Chris Zinovich did Rumors, Neil Simon's play, and cast against type because I was the scared little cop that kind of came on and didn't know what to say. And of course, my personality is not like that. And then I was given the opportunity to direct a couple of shows, the first one being Lady House Blues. And so we had a great time with that. And then I also got to direct Barefoot in the Park and kind of tried to update that and make it fun because it's slightly dated, but it's still just absolutely wonderful.
Once that kind of began to settle into a routine, my first task was to plan the second season and to kind of let the community know what to expect, you know. So it was a real mix of things. It was everything from as conventional as Clue the musical, based on the board game.
I came back to do the Fantastics, and I ran a light board. And it was a musical, and of course I love musicals. And just doing that show, it was so much fun, and we had such a great time. And I want to say I threw the cast party at my house. There was such camaraderie and closeness, and we all got along so well. Just a fun, fun experience.
I got involved with ArtsWest when I moved here to West Seattle, and they had a play, Raising in the Sun. And I came to that production. And since I lived very near to ArtsWest, I decided, this is a place that I would like to do some volunteer work. It may be the choice of play, seeing that they were reaching out and, you know, in different directions. And then I used to like the Christmas events because of the many people that were brought into it, and it was a musical.
In the first search, we found Michael Harris,
who came to the theater and did great things. The risk with, part of that journey was that did he truly want to be an artistic director or did he want to be an artist? Personal opinion, I think he wanted to be an artist. He was very good. He was talented. He brought Voices to Christmas to the theater, which really helped in a time of financial need, and carried on that and began to shift the kind of theater that we were making.
Michael Harris and I worked very closely together. He's a passionate artist. He loved being behind the scenes and doing things. Well, and Chris worked with Michael Harris too, and I think they sometimes bumped heads a little bit, and then the person, because Christopher was there during the time when Michael really had the iron grip on Voices of Christmas.
They all have their strengths and weaknesses, and Michael's no different. Though Michael's sort of enthusiasm and attitude was just wonderful to be around. He was just always so upbeat and a great sort of inspiration to everyone.
Christopher, when if we were running short on season ticket subscriptions, he would get on the phone and start calling people. I mean, he never said that's not my job or I shouldn't do that. I mean, he would do laundry for the actors when he was the artistic director, so he would just do everything. But I said he was there for like 13 years, from the very beginnings.
I think I recall at the time their mission statement was something like, theater that provokes discussion. And that discussion may be raving anger, or that discussion may be adoring love, but as long as people are talking about it, then theater is doing what it's supposed to do, and that's to, of course to entertain, but sometimes to poke the bear. So he was still developing his concept of the kind of work the theater would do, and, making sure that he would be able to put butts in seats, because if you, vary too greatly from what your neighborhood is used to, they're not going to come and see the shows. And I think he was trying to feel the way and what he could express what he wanted the theater to say, as well as still, remain viable.
Our board members were able to introduce me to their friends and host events. Judy Judy hosted, thank you, Judy, a wonderful thing we did once a month before each play opened in her house, where we brought together some donors and some interested people, really whoever wanted to hear from the playwright or the designers or the directors or the staff about the play, why it was an important play, why it was chosen, and give them a little bit of a heads up or a head start.
Every production is important. Every production is going to be the best that it can be. We're going to bring in the best actors and treat them not just like, hey, this is community theater, but this is an opportunity for you to shine as an artist, and we support that. And I think that happened with the way they were treated, but also just the shows that were chosen, the effort and energy that went into creating sets and everything from step one to closing night. I think that there was just a commitment to excellence.
Also within West Seattle is a certain, loyalty, I guess is the best word. It's the most cohesive community in Seattle. That's a strength, and it can also be a challenge, because we did and do need that connection with partner theaters, partner funders, and partner people who are both on the stage and in the seats. So we managed to do that, I think, pretty well. I was pretty proud of, during my 5 years there, is that we were able to offer the mix of programming, the opportunity. Chris Zinovich, thought we'd nailed it when either the Times or the PI, I forget which one, said, if you want comfort, go to see theater downtown. If you want adventure, go to Arts West.
There was one point in time when, it must have been in the summertime, when I could hear all the kids in the music camp running around downstairs and playing music, but there was actors up on the stage rehearsing for a play that was about to open that week, and a new gallery show had opened, and it was just vibrant and wonderful, and it's that way now too. It's a buzz with things going on, and it's kind of a neat place to be.
We sort of had an overarching goal in the beginning, a goal that I think I shared with everyone that came before me, and I'm happy to see everyone that's come after me, which is to offer new artists and emerging artists a place to get started, to offer Seattle some premieres of things that they maybe haven't seen before and maybe wouldn't see unless somebody took the risk.
One of the things that we try to do when you come in, we wanted the art on the walls to be seen. We wanted it to be seen as an art gallery. When you first walked in, with maybe just a hint of something behind the walls.
Around mid-2007, I stepped in as gallery director. It was a part-time position. That eventually led to a full-time position a couple of years later. And we found artists through a call for art. One of the things that I was really interested in was to have the conversation on the walls either match or enhance or maybe contradict the themes that were being supported on stage. After 9/11, we opened up the gallery and people would just come in and kind of looked like they were focusing on the art, but it was more of taking time to just kind of absorb everything that was happening at that time in our lives. And so we had a major influx of people compared to just daily walk-ins that we normally would have had. For the visitor, they could come in and they could have an experience and a thoughtful, thought-provoking experience that not only was in the theater, but once they left the space, to understand how art could continue to impact them, and also have the voices of the artists heard in a very new light.
Before this theater was built, and 5 years thereafter, you could roll a bowling ball down the middle of the sidewalks of the street of West Seattle or down California, and wouldn't hit anybody. It's a place of identity. It's a place to go for people to collect together. We didn't have that before. We had no community center.
Back then, I mean, you could not find anything open after 5 in the afternoon. I mean, things were dead in the junction. Everything was shut down. And so it was nice to have nightlife starting up in the junction. And I think that encouraged some of the shops to start opening later, and that was good.
I felt that it was a way to connect to what was happening in the community. There's lots of other places you can put your time, but it was good to be working with the community and find out what was going on at the junction and just help what you could.
One of the reasons I stayed with Totem Theater, well, one is my love of theater. It all stems from my love of performing arts. And I'm not the kind of person that has to perform to get involved. You know, give me a job and, you know, let me feel like that job is really important, and I will just embrace it.
What kept me going was a love of theater, first and foremost. And I think that was the case with everyone. They really enjoyed the process. The skill of being involved in theater is the skill of being successful at the ultimate group project. And in that group project, which never seems as though it's going to work, and it always comes together because of people's hard work and this willingness to do whatever needs to be done.
Knowing that you, as a person that's willing to provide your time or your expertise or your energy to something that you want for your community, and finding other people who have those same desires and motivations.
ArtsWest is blocks from my house. It's part of my community. It's important for me because one of my highest priorities is to elevate art in our culture. And the fact that it's a theater and a gallery at the same time, there's a wonderful cross-pollination of disciplines and of visitors.
It's really nice to see that ArtsWest is really a part of the community now and has survived. You know, they had their ups and downs, and that's not an easy theater space. So it's nice that it's still thriving. And I think it really helped the Junction.
ArtsWest, you know, kind of created a snowball effect of renovation in the downtown West Seattle area because, golly, if you look at it now, it's a hustling, bustling place where people are out every night walking the streets and doing things, and the theater has continued to thrive.
It's been really fun to watch that growth happen. And now I know that we are considered far much more than a community theater.
I will always be beholden to ArtsWest for that, and to Chris for that, as well as, you know, a multitude of other people. Every music director I ever worked with on the musicals I did here, all of them made you love the work and love doing the work, and that doesn't always happen.
So many people and so many capacities here, either working or just people who just would come for the plays and all. So it was a very rewarding part of and satisfying part of my life.
What makes ArtsWest so special in this building is that the community came together and helped build it. And I was just very happy to be a part of it. And we should all be very proud of it. It's grown a lot. We have a magnificent product. It is not a community theater, it's a theater in the community.
Arts Fund is a great organization in Seattle for funding in the arts, and they did a study, and it seems to me it probably was a while ago, though they may have repeated it, and it showed how every dollar that comes to an arts organization is multiplied as the patrons, the people in the seats, then go out to dinner, and then they go to the store, and then they buy ice cream, and it is a great community. It's a magnifier. And so ArtsWest brought vibrancy dollars and was the anchor to all of the construction that you see around that has grown out of that.
It gave us an opportunity to sort of raise the flag for the arts in West Seattle, to suggest that this is a vibrant, strong community that had a strong arts presence, but it has a regional and sort of broader community impact.
Matt and the crew over there are continuing to choose things that that give people, you know, either entertain or give people pause to think about something or address an issue, or all those things at once, which I think when theater's at its best, it does both. It's entertaining and it's thought-provoking. So I see that continuing in an unbroken stream.
They have quietly just said, we are committed to being more diverse in our approach. And so they're hiring actors of color, and they're hiring playwrights of color and women. And it's not about a tokenism that says this will be the play that we do for you. This is embedded into the season.
And I think that that's what made this place successful. It's tough to be in a theater. It's tough to make budget and keep the lights on. And I think one of the things that really helped make ArtsWest happen was the fact that the community said, yes, we're going to make it happen.